Welcome back to the MizzouToday Show on 3 and Rivals. I'm your host, Kenny Van Doren, joined as always by Kyle McAreavy. Kyle, we're going to get right into it. I was looking at it. We're talking transfer portal in Mizzou here on the show today, of course. No, we're still not going to do any basketball recording here on Wednesday. Kyle's going to be heading out to that home game for the Tigers against Auburn. And we'll get more into basketball once everything kind of closes with the transfer portal. But we were looking at it before we came on, Kyle, because we were trying to figure out, who are the last guys we talked about. The day that we recorded last episode, last Wednesday, there were 3 commits that happened right after we were done recording. We predicted 2 of them. Felt like everything was trending in that direction with 2 former Auburn players. We'll talk about here in a second. So I'm going to go through the latest additions, and then we'll do a quick break, and then we'll talk about some departures and then some remaining needs, if that's good with everyone. And I guess you guys don't have a say because we're recording this not live. So we're going to do it with we're just going to start on January 7th. There were 3 commitments that day. All happened after we were done recording. Kensley Louidor-Faustin, Luke Work, and Horatio Fields. We'll start with Kensley because I think this is an interesting one. It took a little bit longer for Missouri to officially announce it. I got some messages asking, has Missouri, signed him? Why haven't we seen this yet? They finally announced it here on Wednesday, a week later. You've seen them announce probably some signings within 24 hours of the commitment actually happening. And usually when the commitment happens, the signature is in. It just takes Missouri a little longer to officially announce it, and that's when we'll consider it as official once the team announces. So we'll start with Kensley coming over. You talked to him, Kyle. I think that's the good thing to start with. He called himself an all-around DB. I mean, what do you like just from his time at Auburn, and then what you kind of learned about him when you spoke to him?
Yeah, and you pointed it out. That was kind of the biggest thing he talked about, was just being one of my favorite quotes from it was like, I don't want to be known as a safety. I don't want to be known as a corner. I'm a defensive back. I'm a DB. It's like, okay, makes sense. His true freshman season, most of his reps came at outside corner, and his sophomore season, most of his reps came at slot corner. So like, he's listed as a safety. He was a safety coming out of high school, but most of his reps in college are one-on-one or at least zone coverage coming from a corner spot, which I think is interesting. I've pointed that out in a few of my stories, and kind of when I talked to him, I asked him, what the pitch was of how he fits into Mizzou's defensive scheme. And he said Corey Batoon told him they needed a one-on-one man coverage type of guy. And that sounds a lot more like a corner to me than a safety replacement, right? So I think there's a non-zero chance that he ends up just being part of the corner competition instead of the safety competition for starting spots, or the Tigers could throw him in the starter position and kind of shrink that role down a little bit and make it more of kind of a slot coverage position versus what Dalen Carnell had been doing as more of that hybrid linebacker. You could kind of make it lean more toward the hybrid safety side of it and focus on the coverage. But I think there's a lot of different opportunities available for him specifically.
You can't have enough, versatile defensive backs, especially when you have that star position. It's been, brought over, in the Blake Baker days. It's when you first kind of heard about it, and they're still running with it, and they like that hybrid look. And Jadon Blair, that was the last guy to commit before Kensley, and that, he's a guy, or I guess Naeshaun Edwards was right before him, but the day before. And then that's another guy that could probably be one of those versatile defensive backs of the future. He's coming with 4 years of eligibility, a little bit different than Kensley. We'll stick with another Auburn guy before we talk about Luke Work and Horatio Fields, wide receiver. Only played in 4 games at Auburn, ended up suffering a foot injury in practice, missing the rest of the season. He started his career at Wake Forest. He never played against Missouri. He's played against on 2 teams that have been, pretty memorable games, between those 2 in the last couple of years, but never has played against Missouri. What do you like about Horatio coming in? He does have 2 years of eligibility, according to when he announced he was going to the portal.
Yeah, and I think it was a broken foot that ended up being the issue last year. I think the biggest thing with him is experience. The receiver room has a distinct lack of experience, right? There's some talented guys in there. Donovan Alubide's, has sky high potential. Like some of those other freshmen, a lot of potential, but there's almost no returning experience. The three guys back from last year were all true freshmen. Louidor is the only one who played regularly on offense. The addition of Caleb Goody, we talked about last week, he has 3 years of college experience. That's, a solid amount. Horatio Fields has 5 years of full-time college experience, including his redshirt year and the injury year. Like, he knows what it takes to play on a college football team in a way that you maybe don't get from 1 or 2 years of experience. And that's important to add to the room. There's just a knowledge base that comes with being around longer. And that's an important part of that was missing from that room.
Horatio, yeah, class of 2021. Don't really know the official breakdown of how that works. Hopefully, once Drinkwitz does a full portal roundup, he can answer some questions about availability, because we do have some other ones, or not availability, excuse me, eligibility. Some other guys in there that you still, do they have 1 year, 2 years? You think like all this is in the past. It's not. I mean, we're going to be talking about this for a long time. The redshirt rule might move to 9 games as well.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up, because if they make that retroactive, there's going to be a lot of math that we have to do about, like, oh, did one guy only play 8 games one season and he can retroactively retain a redshirt for his junior year, and now he's got an extra year of eligibility? Like, did Toriano Pride only play 7 games his freshman year at Clemson? I don't know. So there's stuff like that if this new rule gets implemented, it just makes it trickier.
We'll move to the offensive line now. I'm going to give you 3 guys just right away, because it comes in order there. Kyle could talk about each one. Luke Wark coming over. He played 2 years at Mississippi State. There's a guy who didn't earn a red shirt in those 2 years, but he was very versatile. He played 4 of the 5 offensive line positions, excluding center. Started some games at tackle, at right tackle in his freshman year. Numbers weren't great, even on PFF, but once the sample size got a little bit smaller, he didn't have to be in that starting role as an underclassman. He did improve immensely when you look at the grades. Josh Atkins was the biggest offensive line acquisition so far in the transfer portal, likely going to be the biggest one, because you're looking at a starting offensive tackle there, possibly playing right tackle opposite of Caden Green, who Missouri finally officially announced as re-signing as well, even though he announced it to On3 a couple of weeks ago. But Josh comes over with 1 year of eligibility from Arizona State, ton of experience. He started 39 games in a row, 2 years at Arizona State, 1 year at Hawaii. And of course, he knows Brandon Jones as well, because he was recruited by B. Jones at Houston right out of high school. He didn't play for the Cougars, though, just sat for 2 seasons there. And the last one is Will Kemna. There's a little bit of a surprise, looked like maybe a walk-on. But in this day, it feels like everyone's going to have a scholarship in some capacity, even if you might be a guy that's not garnering too much NIL, but he returns home. He's from Hawaii, so you got to watch him in high school, down there in Jefferson City. He's coming over from Kansas State with 4 years of eligibility, more of one of those development guy you're going to try to keep around, see if it works out. And, if he gets the opportunity to come home, I'm pretty sure he was going to run with it. And Evan Boehm was good with him and Luke Wark too. So I'm intrigued to see if Evan Boehm's role expands more as a coach as well, not just a personnel. But of that trio, Kyle, let us know what you think.
I'll start with Atkins, because, like you said, he's the biggest addition that I expect the Tigers will make on the offensive line. There might be another body coming, but I kind of doubt it at this point. I was trying to do the math in my head, and I think the room is at least equal to where it was scholarship-wise last year, or maybe one more.
I'll jump in. We say that, but there's going to be an offensive lineman visiting on Thursday now.
That's true.
From Charleston Southern. And that looks more like a depth piece. And I'm going to pull it up real quick, because I don't know his name off the top of my head. Sorry, there's so many names, but Colin Sorensen, he announced a visit for Thursday with Missouri. We're currently in the NCAA dead period. Today's the last day. It was Monday through Wednesday. But Charleston Southern, he started his freshman year. But he's 2 years plus a red shirt of eligibility. So I think he's very willing, to probably use that red shirt if needed. Yeah.
So, like I said, there's a chance they still add a body to the room with the expanded scholarship availabilities. It's a spot where you could add bodies that make sense along the offensive line. You can never have enough of them. Atkins is an expected starter coming in. I mean, like you said, he's started every game for 3 years in a row, 1 year at Hawaii, 2 years at Arizona State. Those were all at left tackle, which is not my expectation. I think Caden Green was a really, really good left tackle last year once he got adjusted. I know that first game kind of sticks out in people's minds, but He ended up, I think, the best pass blocking tackle, or one of the best graded in the country, according to PFF. He was really good at left tackle. I know there's conversations about moving him back to left guard. I think the Atkins move was to get a right tackle to replace Keegan Trust. And I think if those are your two tackles, it's a fine group again. Atkins has very similar PFF numbers to what Trust did his last year at Wake Forest. So maybe you adjust the system, you get him on Mizzou's team, and he could see, if not the same level of development, a level of development, and turn into a viable or more viable right tackle. Luke Work brings a lot of versatility. You mentioned he's played all the spots except center. I think that's kind of the key part of that addition. Mizzou lost a lot of guys who were probably expected to be on at least the two deep, especially with Javen Richardson and Johnny Williams. Some of the younger guys who left maybe were expected to kind of step up and take on more of a role. So bringing in a guy who, while not like incredible in his opportunities, has SEC level experience, and has the ability to kind of slot in wherever you need him. That's kind of what Tristan Wilson ended up doing last year a little bit, because he was the backup at all three interior positions, and he's probably a starter next year at this point. So you need another guy who you trust to be able to move around like that. And then Will Kemna, like you said, I covered him a little bit in high school while I was at the Jeff City News Tribune. I was our Capital City football beat guy. So when Capital City and Helias would play each other, I got to see Kemna. And there were a lot of games that I saw where he was clearly the best offensive lineman on the field. He was just an incredibly strong kid, pretty smart, and, good for him for getting to come home. I don't think he's, expected to be on the two deep this year or really like competing for a spot. But as you mentioned, he didn't play last year. He's got 4 years of eligibility left. Like, maybe he turns into a good developmental piece. His recruitment kind of came on pretty late in high school. I don't think there was much communication, if any, with Mizzou specifically. So, good for him. That's a fun story, getting to come home and play, half an hour, 45 minutes from where he grew up, and could long-term end up a good addition.
And Greg Smith, Midwest National beat reporter or analyst, he wrote about it. He spoke with Kemna briefly, and Kemna said, Mizzou's home. If you got the opportunity to go home and, develop there, and like you mentioned, he kind of took off a little bit late. He played at it was 5A school. He's played on Faroe Field before. He played in the state title game. He lost to Platte County. Platte County in 2024. So it's familiar playing there. I think that, that there's some fun ones to just bring guys back home, especially with expanded scholarships and guys not having to be true walk-ons. And they announced him as an official signing. Same with another guy we're going to talk about here in a second. But we'll talk about the run on Florida. Missouri went after a bunch of Florida guys here in a row. Florida transfer, Naeshaun Montgomery, wide receiver, comes with 4 years of eligibility. It was between the Gators and Mizzou. Closed the door on Florida, and he's going to come to Missouri. Jaden Jones, defensive end. When we're talking about guys, we don't know how much eligibility is left. He does have 2 years somehow. He did tear his ACL twice, so he got a medical red shirt in there in college. But he comes in as a pretty good depth guy for that defensive end room. And then Donta Simpson comes in with 3 years of eligibility for the defensive tackle room from Miami. Jaden Jones from Florida State. Talk about that trio and just the run on the Sunshine State.
Yeah, so I'll just go in the order you went. Naeshaun Montgomery, very talented receiver, was highly touted coming out of high school. Didn't get a ton of opportunity last year, but I think he played in 4 games and 3 of them were SEC games. It's another, like I was talking about, very talented, very young receiver. So he'll be a redshirt freshman, which I think only Sean Terry will also be a redshirt freshman. Demarion Folks played enough on special teams to not retain his red shirt. So Mizzou will have 4 receivers from the class of 2025 that are all pretty talented, highly regarded kids, at least when they were coming out of high school. Montgomery will, I'm sure, compete and see how he holds up against the group. I don't know what the expectations are are for him next year at this point, but we'll see, because as the receiver room stands right now, the Tigers don't really have a starter in the slot, and he's kind of size-wise fits into that competition alongside Folks and Sean Terry, so maybe it's those three kind of fighting it out for who gets the most in the slot. Jaden Jones has never put up incredible numbers. The injuries have played a pretty big role in that, but he's athletic. I mean, he's really, really athletic. I don't expect him to kind of jump into the primary rotation at this point, but the defensive end room is significantly weaker right now than it was last year. There is still expected additions there, especially I think I was once again kind of doing the math, and I think the defensive end room, even with the other addition that we'll talk about in a second here, still has 2 fewer guys than it did last year on scholarship, and 3 fewer guys who are an expected portion of the rotation, or like a part of the plan at least. So I expect more additions there. We can kind of talk about the state of the portal going into this second weekend of it a little later, but I think Jones is a good depth piece to add in, but I don't expect him to take a significant amount of snaps, especially not taking them away from Darius Johnson or Langdon Kitchen or Dayton Hopkins. And then Donta Simpson was the third one you brought up. Pretty talented true freshman. I mean, breaking in at all on the defensive line at Miami this year as a true freshman is pretty impressive. He didn't play a massive role, but he played a role as a true freshman, enough to not retain his red shirt for a team that has a really, really good defensive line. I expect, because of the state of that room too, he's an expected rotational guy right now. I mean, there's just not a ton of experience in that room, and Donta Simpson brings at least a year of regular experience. And yeah, I mean, I think he's a solid add. It's just, that's another spot where hopefully Mizzou is not done, because I think, again, like defensive end, there are 2 or 3 guys down in that room compared to where they were at this point last year.
And with Donta Simpson as well, I found it a little bit interesting that, when he was talking about when he entered the portal, he was looking for a place where he could play, still get developed a little bit, but he wanted an opportunity to just hit the ground running. And, Missouri seemed, like, okay, will that work out? And when you really look at the defensive tackle room, I think that's going to be one where he's going to probably see consistent snaps, unless they add someone else. They're linked to Tioni Gray, who's a former commit in the 2024 class, but also looks like it's trending in Notre Dame's direction. I think you're looking at the guy who's probably your 3rd defensive tackle right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle.
Probably behind Marquise Gracial and Jalen Marshall, which Jalen Marshall doesn't have an incredible amount of experience. He ended up 4th in snaps last year among defensive tackles. That surprised me a little bit when I looked back. I thought Braylon Henderson had a few more, but Henderson kind of fell back, especially at the end of the year. So, like, Gracial and Marshall bring some level of experience. Gracial was obviously part of the key rotation last year, but after those two, there's not a lot of experience coming in. So I think in 1 year, I was doing this for the portal impact story on Simpson. I think in his 1 year, he has more career snaps played than Sam Williams, Elias Williams, and certainly Dante McClellan, who are the other 3 options in that room. And Sam Williams is going to be a redshirt junior, I think. Elias Williams will be a redshirt sophomore, and McClellan will be a redshirt freshman. No, not Dante McClellan's a linebacker.
Jason Dowell.
Thank you. Jason Dowell. Same class, got a little mixed up, but Jason Dowell be a redshirt freshman. So all of those guys come in with fewer snaps played than Donta Simpson in just his 1 year as a kind of part-timer at Miami.
We'll move on, and you alluded to this guy, Cavan Tuley, who was a little bit of a surprise one that popped up as well. He's coming over from Houston, 1 year of eligibility remaining. He committed to Bryan early out of high school. He's from Tomball, which is northwest Houston, so he's been a Houston guy for a long time. Mainly a special teamer, but he comes over with edge experience. He knows Bryan early. He was committed to Sac Ave when that was, in the 5th Ward down there in Houston. And so From the next group, it's him, Brunno Reus, and Nick Evers. Brunno Reus being a kicker punter, probably going to take over that punting job for Missouri. That's a scholarship special teamer as well. They've got 3 of those, and the 3 all played in the All-American Bowl, just with not or the Under Armour All-America game, with Brunno Reus playing in 2025 and the other 2, Blake Craig and Brett LeBlanc, playing in 2023. And then Nick Evers comes in as very experienced quarterback depth. He has 1 year of eligibility remaining. What can you say from that trio?
Yeah. The Houston edge rusher, I don't know a ton about. I know he was a walk-on. He earned a scholarship last year, I think partway through the season, maybe, or it might have been right before the season. I think that's depth, at best. He was a important special teamer for Houston, but not much more. Fine addition, but not an expectation of him to play really any sort of role within the major portion of that room. Reese is probably going to be the punter at this point because it's him and John Butcher. And John Butcher, haven't really heard his name at all outside of, me listing who's in the room. So I think he's probably the punter. He was a pretty highly regarded combo special teamer, kicker / punter coming out of high school. So, he's never punted in college. He played in 4 games last year as a place kicker / kickoff guy. I'm sure a lot of fans aren't super pleased with an addition at punter with a guy who's never punted in college, but he comes over with Papuchis to be a special teamer. There was obviously some amount of hype around him coming out of high school, and it looks like that's where Mizzou's going to turn there. And then Evers, almost certainly just depth at that point. I kind of go back and forth on what I think of the quarterback room as a whole, because when Austin Simmons was added, I was fairly confident that Drinkwitz would have a competition between him and Zollers to earn the starting spot, right? And I'm sure going into spring camp, Drinkwitz's messaging about it will be all 3 of them can earn the starting spot, or even Gavin Sidwar could earn the starting spot if they have an incredible camp, right? Like that's what the messaging was last year, was like Zollers isn't out of it. He could be the starter. And I'm sure that's what it'll be again. Realistically, the Evers addition kind of shifted me to thinking that Simmons is probably at the very least leading in the competition now by a fairly significant margin. And the actual competition will be whether Zollers or Evers is the full-time backup. And, if Evers shows enough that you feel you can trust him as the backup, maybe that allows Zollers to use his redshirt year and kind of prepare down the line. If not, then you go in with Zollers as the backup, Evers as the 3rd string, and you don't run into the same situation that you had this year if there's 2 freak plays and now your true freshman is out there burning his red shirt and starting for you.
We had talked about it for so long, Kyle, about the need for that second quarterback. And I think Missouri hit a home run here. I wouldn't say maybe you want some guy who's a little bit more starting experience. Nick started he started a handful of games for UConn in his first year there. Didn't really have much, success or time on the field at Oklahoma, not even Wisconsin, even touched the field or recorded stats, that is. But I think he did well, going out, if you're saying you as in Missouri, and going out and getting a guy with this experience that can come in, and he's accepted it. I mean, when I spoke to him, it sounded like, he's content with going in there, trying to just better everyone else, get his degree, just keep improving as a football player and just play with a, SEC team. He's never played in the SEC. He played for Oklahoma before Oklahoma joined the SEC.
Big 12, yeah.
Yeah, so he's been a Big 12 guy. He's been in the Big 10 independent with UConn. So he's been around, and, the final year of eligibility probably good for him. So wrapping it up, this is the big one. Happens Tuesday night. Elijah Dotson. It was between Michigan, going back to Michigan. He was a freshman this past year, or going to Missouri. You get an impact cornerback here, Kyle, and you get a guy with years of eligibility. That is the biggest thing to me, in my opinion. This is what Al Polk and that cornerback group wanted in the portal last year. They wanted it in the spring portal. They just didn't find their guy. I think this is a home run get on multiple facets. It checks off multiple boxes for that room. What do you like about Elijah Dotson?
Yeah, he played a moderate role for Michigan, again, kind of like Donta Simpson, where I think they both ended up around 100 snaps played. I think Dotson ended up at like 94 in 9 games, and Simpson ended up like at 103 or something in 10 games. So right around that 10 snaps per game mark. Those numbers might be slightly off, but Dotson, considering the limited role he played, had an interception and another batted pass, which on, I think, 7 total targets is insane efficiency. I mean, that's a fantastic. If you impact 2 out of every 7 passes that are thrown your way, that's an insane efficiency rate. I don't expect that to continue as the case if his role expands, which it would have to if he's going to take on like a major role with Mizzou. When I was looking, all 3 of the rotational corners played at least 500 snaps last year. I think Stephen Hall and Toriano Pride were both around 570, and Drayden Norwood was at like 510, which was affected because of an injury. So you're looking at 550 plus snaps for a Mizzou rotational corner versus the 94 that Dotson played last year. So that's a big jump. But he's obviously talented. I mean, clearly a very talented kid. And I think kind of fits the one-on-one man coverage mold that it seems like Mizzou was maybe targeting a little bit more. I don't know how Jaleel Florence fits into that. But like we were talking about with Louidor-Faustin earlier, like this was something I was talking about with some of the other beat guys the other night. The one of the main differences from the 2023 defense for Mizzou to the last 2 years, even though the overall defense has improved, was corner play, because Chris Abrams-Drain and Ennis Rakestraw were able to one-on-one match up with just about anybody, and Mizzou was able to man cover a majority of the time. The last 2 years, because of a slight downgrade in corner ability overall, Mizzou had to stick with kind of a softer zone pretty consistently, which allowed a lot of short completions, a higher completion rate in 2024, at least. It was lower in 2025, which surprised me. But like that kind of led to some issues on defense. Some of the things that fans like to point out as like, oh, the defense keeps giving up these short completions. You know, that's the primary issue. It's because they had to kind of stick into that soft zone so that corners wouldn't get beat in man-to-man coverage. It seems like with Dotson, with Louidor-Faustin, maybe with Jaleel Florence, I'll have to look more into that. They could be kind of trying to shift back to a man-to-man coverage situation, which might be a little bit easier for athletically gifted corners to adjust to. Because as we've talked about recently, the Mizzou system the last 2 years on defense, especially with corners, but also with safeties, has been kind of tough for new guys to adjust to. And a man-to-man one-on-one coverage situation might be a little easier because it's just stick on your guy instead of the communication and making sure you have the pass-offs correct.
I think I put this down wrong, Kyle, but so that would mean Elijah Dotson's eligible through the 2028 season, correct?
Should be.
Okay, I had him down for 2029, so I'll get that updated here in a second. But that gives you 6 scholarship cornerbacks. You might add a 7th one this weekend in Treshunda Neal, who's visiting from the high school ranks. He's from the Kansas City area, went to Liberty North. So if you do bring him in, he's going to be on an official visit. That would put you around 7. I mean, do you think this cornerback room is going to add someone else in the transfer portal?
Maybe. I kind of don't think so right now. We knew they were going to go hunting for multiple guys, and especially if they pull in a class of 2026 guy this late in the cycle, that probably fills out the room. That helps you replace youth-wise the guys who have left, and especially Dotson does too. I mean, having 3 years of eligibility left coming there makes up the loss of Mark Manfred, if you want to say it that way. And if you add a class of 2026 guy, I think the room's probably fine. And I mentioned it in his impact story. I think you're probably looking at a competition between Dotson, Florence, Nick DeLoach, Cameron Keys, and maybe Louidor-Faustin for 3 total spots at corner, mostly, if that's what the Tigers want to do with Louidor-Faustin. And I think that could produce a fine 3-man rotation if that's what you're looking at.
It'll be interesting because, like you're mentioning, it does feel like maybe the defensive philosophy will change a little bit just with how they're going to approach defensive backs and where they're going to place guys. So,
and maybe just overall, because you're replacing all of the starters except for Santana Banner and Marquise Graciel rotationally. Like everyone else is gone. So it wouldn't shock me if the defense scheme-wise looks a little bit different because you have to build around the guys you have, and all of the guys you have are different now than they were before.
I wanted to point this out real quick as well. And Jaden Jones, you talk about the athleticism too. He's 6'6", 240 pounds. Probably going to be a guy that puts his hand in the dirt a little bit, like Zion Young on that strong side of the defensive line. Quick read from our sponsors over at Roback before we talk about some departures and the remaining needs, Kyle. But there's only one way to describe Roback. It's best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Roback, Kyle's wearing it right now for our viewers on YouTube. They're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable active wear. Roback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection, and it's our favorite with novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs for some of your favorite schools. It's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else in the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of active wear. Roback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They're both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Roback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Use the code MIZ20 on Roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers through the end of this week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with code MIZ20.
Before we jump back into it, I think we might need to take a pause because there's been some breaking news. According to Hayes Fawcett, Oregon transfer corner Sione Laulea has committed to Missouri. So we should probably pause and do some writing.
We will be right back. All right, apologies for the brief pause there. Good eyes by Kyle to point that out. But Missouri has a new commitment. A little bit of a surprise. We didn't really have him on our radar. I'll be honest, we didn't have him on our radar at all. Even Kyle just said maybe they were done at cornerback. They get a guy with 1 year of eligibility remaining in Sione Laulea, who comes over from Oregon, second cornerback to join the Tigers from there, with Jaleel Florence being the first commitment in this transfer cycle for Missouri. You just did a portal impact. I think it only took us, like 15, 20 minutes to get all that up right now, just now, Kyle. What did you just learn about Sione?
I think that's the fastest I've been provably wrong on something. It usually takes a little longer than 30 seconds for me to say something declarative and have it be provably wrong. He played about 10 games for Oregon, former number 2 JUCO recruit in the class of 2024, I believe, coming from, I think, San Mateo College. Played about exactly 10 games with Oregon, had 10 tackles, 5 passes defended, and an interception. His PFF numbers this year looked pretty good. He played in 6 games, about 20 snaps per game, but an injury ended the season, basically, and then he decided to hit the portal with 1 year remaining. The PFF grades are about all I know at this point. They're pretty good. I mean, I don't really know what to expect out of the addition. We were just talking about the possible competition for corner rotation. Maybe this is an addition that lets you kind of take Louidor-Faustin back to that star spot like we were talking about. Maybe this is the one that kind of shows that Mizzou did not want to move him to corner like I thought they might. Or that's still possible. It just kind of depends moving forward. But definitely knew the Tigers were after multiple corners coming into the portal. I thought 2 plus a high school guy would get it done. I guess 3 portal corners, and they'll still have that high school guy on campus. So maybe they really want to grow this room.
Yeah, you could probably never have enough either. I think 3 or I guess it was 4. I think that was the lowest it got with scholarship cornerbacks this offseason with 2 returners and Nick DeLoach and Cameron Keys. Of course, Nick DeLoach was a starter at one point in the 2024 season, especially down the stretch, competing for snaps. And 2 of those guys that were coming in among those 4 was Ahmad Billions and Jackson Gates in the 2026 class. And only Jackson Gates will be on campus early this weekend for early enrollment. So I guess that's a good sign. Just keep strengthening that cornerback room. Probably get as many bodies in there as you can with the scholarship total going up. You can probably bring in some guys from around the state too, like we're talking about Tristan Daniil, who probably might not be in that category of guys in another year, but he did have a late rise in his recruitment. Is now on the Tigers' radar. Kyle, I think that's going to do it for additions right now, unless something else just pops up
Hopefully.
now. But I'll run through some of the changes, or maybe not changes, but guys that found new homes that were former Missouri players over the last couple of weeks as well. I'm going down the list. Josh Manning landed at Kansas State, Marvin Burks at Wisconsin, Javen Richardson at Colorado, James Madison at UTSA, Johnny Williams in North Texas. Still going down the list, Daniel Blood ended up at Washington State, followed his brother there too. Kirby Moore, Durham Cato, Jack Abercrombie. I mean, the list goes on and on. Nate Johnson's going to Auburn. Brendan Haygood joins that group of North Texas kids, or Mizzou guys at North Texas as well. Mark Manford is going to Kentucky. Bo Perbulo, this was a big one. He's going to Virginia. So that's among the guys that found new homes. Transfer portal entries recently for Missouri includes Dakota Terrell, tight end in the 2025 class. He'll be pursuing basketball, so looks like his college football career is over. He was a big, time basketball player in high school in the state of Oklahoma. Received 3 offers before turning his full attention to football and playing that at the next level. We missed this one. I don't even know why we entirely missed it. It was the day after it happened, but we didn't even talk about it. And Damon Wilson entered the portal as well. And we'll talk about, maybe there's still another guy out there that could replace his spot on the roster. And then Mose Phillips entered the portal here on Wednesday when we're recording this. And then you lost 2 walk-on quarterbacks. You got their names for me? Cameron Ellaby and
Easton Smith.
So that's where you go on the losses. So what do you make of all that? And I guess you could talk about Damon if you'd like, even though it's been a week now.
I was thinking earlier, is Damon the only one, I guess now with Mose Phillips, who just entered, who is yet to find a new home?
That's a good question. Of course, we're not going to have anything on Dakota Terrell or probably the walk-on quarterbacks anytime soon. Justin Bodford hasn't committed anywhere.
Yeah, he visited Missouri State, which kind of makes sense with Al Davis taking the defensive line job there. He was recruited by Al Davis. I guess I'll stick with it because that's out of the major guys. It was just an interesting thing. You've seen a few times more recently guys who entered the portal rescinding their names. So I was trying to think if there were any kind of leftovers who had just been in the portal for a while and might be options for that. That seems pretty unlikely with Damon Wilson. He's getting some looks from some schools that have been throwing around a lot of money this offseason. Losing Damon Wilson is a major deal, right? But I think the Tigers were kind of expecting him to leave. I don't know how many people were expecting to hit the portal. I think the expectation was a little more that he would go to the draft, which, if you look at On3's rankings and stuff, we've had this conversation on the site a little bit more in the last couple of days. On3's ranking specifically takes in, quality of players who have left your team to enter the portal versus quality of players who have come from the portal to join the team. And Mizzou's rankings are kind of low overall. And I think a large portion of that is the number 4 overall player in the portal in Damon Wilson left the team to go to the portal. If he had left the team to go to the draft, nothing really changes for the Tigers except the ranking goes up a lot. So it's one of those situations where it's a pretty big deal, but there was already somewhat of a plan in place if he left because the draft was always a realistic possibility for him.
Yeah, felt like as it dragged on more and more, Kyle, and you don't see the re-sign graphic, you don't see the decision, the graphic to announce your intentions of going to the NFL draft, like you've seen with Josiah Trotter or the guys that ran out of eligibility. I think in the back of your mind, you're starting to think, okay, what's going on here? And so it's just one of those cases where he's going to go out, make some more money, probably somewhere else, and be on a team that's going to win. I saw someone pointed out, I guess he cares more about winning than, or cares more about money than winning. And then I replied, well, he did leave the SEC champs to go play at Missouri. I think there was multiple parts that played into that, actually getting on the field and playing probably a little bit more at the same time. But that plays into it. And now you look at who's left just among the players that have visited Missouri. They have interest and connections to Missouri. You put a piece out this morning here on Wednesday. Where's your thought on some of these guys that are still left on the board, and what are the last positions of need?
Yeah. So when you're talking about edge rusher, Colorado's Samuel Okunlola, I think that's how you pronounce it, something like that, is kind of the last one who's a known connection already, right? He was visiting last weekend before the dead period. Same with, he was on campus generally at the same time as like Wendell Gregory, Quay Rasawa, James Smith. There was a lot of big names on campus right before the dead period. He posted on X yesterday or Monday, during the dead period. He just reposted his original, like, I'm going to the portal post, which I found interesting. That seems to signal like, hey, I'm still here. Come talk to me. And yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier, depth at both defensive line spots is still lacking a lot. So I expect Mizzou might go ahead and make a run at Okunlola. If they hadn't already been pretty actively pursuing him, he might have been kind of the lower end of that group that was here on campus. Although I think Jaden Jones was also here on campus at the same time as that group. Went ahead and got him. And important thing to note, there's today, tomorrow, and Friday, players can still enter their names. There will be more players who enter the portal. And there's plenty of time for teams to sign people. I meant to look up the Mizzou academic calendar before we hopped on here. I forgot to do that, but I think the official drop date for classes, like when you can add and drop classes, is next week. So I expect kind of a flurry of commitments and movement this weekend as Mizzou tries to get guys in fast enough to get in before the deadline, that you can still add classes. They can still be enrolled for spring semester. They can still play in spring ball. So we'll see. There's still a lot of movement to be made, but that list, along with Okunlola, Derek Joyner was on there, an interior offensive lineman from Houston who Mizzou offered on like the first day of the portal, and then there's just been nothing about him or really any movement. I was, checking his social media feeds, and the last post he had was that Mizzou offered. So it's been, a week and a half since he'd posted. Seems like maybe the Tigers have moved on with the addition of Luke Work and Will Kemna, like we were talking about earlier. And then the Oregon defensive tackle, whose name I can't think of right now, was on there, but it seems you said Tione Gray, but he is committed to Notre Dame, or that's
it's trending that way. There's predictions already, so maybe something will come out by the time people actually get to listen to this, but it has kind of moved in the Irish direction, even though Missouri was going to have interest.
Okay. I think there was one more name on there, but it was, I think, similar to Joyner, where it's like, not trending in that direction. There are other guys who we expect the Tigers would be interested in, like Oregon defensive end Toby Hastrup, who they were second in the recruitment of last year coming out of high school. There's been no official communication there yet, as far as we know, but that's very possible. And there are other guys who the Tigers will make a run at. There's a lot of spots left to fill, and kind of as the portal dwindles down a little bit here in the final few days, a lot of teams have kind of made the moves that they're going to make and spent the money that they're going to spend. And Mizzou, I think we already talked a little bit about Damon Wilson, but like Damon Wilson was getting, I don't know exactly how much money, but a good amount of money. That's why he came to Mizzou last year. And that money doesn't appear to have been specifically spent yet. Maybe some of it went to landing Dotson. But like there was a lot of money that came off the books for Mizzou this year because of who left for the NFL, who has gone into the portal. Like there should be more available. And, the Tigers have still 10-ish maybe spots to fill. I expect they'll probably kind of make a flurry of additions here across the next 5 days as they try to rush kids onto campus and get them enrolled.
That's the one tough part of this too, Kyle, because we do like to try to go out there and, talk to these players, why they chose Mizzou. We've done a couple already with, Nick Evers, Brunno Reus. You didn't want to do that, like we mentioned with Kensley. We have one with Donta Simpson, Will Kemna. We try to get some others. Because a lot of these guys are trying to move at the same time. Like school starts very fast. The high schoolers will be on campus this weekend, moving into their dorms as well as school starts right around the corner next week. There's probably not many opportunities to meet these guys, but I think that's what fall camp and spring practice will be for as well. You'll probably get an opportunity to talk to some of those guys then, tell us a little bit more about them then. Well, Kyle, do you have anything else transfer portal wise? Did you just see you were about to speak. Did you see something else?
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't know how many of the transfer guys we'll get to talk to during spring ball. That tends to be how Drinkwitz has handled media availability during spring ball and fall camp. Is generally returners and guys who have played for Mizzou are the ones we get a chance to talk to. The new guys tend to get to focus on working their way into the system and the team before they meet with media officially. So we'll see. That was just kind of I was just reacting to you saying I might get a chance to talk to him. I kind of don't think so. I hope we get a chance to talk to Austin Simmons specifically. But we'll see, because I don't remember getting a chance to talk to Bo Perbula during spring ball or fall camp last year. I don't think outside of the one specific major media day where every player is available.
Yeah, I think you might maybe see with some of those more impact guys, like wouldn't be surprised if maybe Caleb Goody gets one or Josh Atkins gets an opportunity to talk after a practice with some other guys. I think we saw it with Dominic Giudice as well.
Got to talk to him, got to talk to Kevin Coleman and Josiah Trotter. So maybe it might be shifting toward guys who have a certain amount of college experience and have talked to media before at other teams. So yeah. Maybe.
We'll see when we get there. Kyle will be at all those practices as well in the next 2 months. Yeah, it'll be 2 months from now. Probably
not far away.
Not far away. Football never ends. So Kyle will have you covered for then. He's going to be off to the basketball game tonight. Tigers looking to bounce back against Auburn at 6:00. SEC Network?
ESPN 2.
ESPN 2. But by the time you're listening to this, it might be already happening or already over. So you guys enjoy that. We will see you guys next week, talking even more about the transfer portal, maybe a little bit more about basketball, just depending on where the state of the portal is for your Missouri Tigers. Follow everything at MizzouToday.com. Have a safe week, and we will see you next Wednesday.